Good morning, friends, on this wonderful or wacky Wednesday morning. I come to you in pink today, which is the color of friendliness, because I'm trying to be friendly to myself and friendly to the world, because it has been storming on Fort Myers Beach for 3 days. And let me tell you, storms are not the same since we went through Ian. The rain, the storms, the flooding, and the crazy winds can throw me off and feel like a major disruption for me and for my buddy Leo, who shakes through these storms. But I'm glad you're with us, because we try to come to you every single week and remind you that in the face of the disruptions, we still have choices. In the face of the storms that we go through, that come at us, that we are not prepared for, we still have choices about how we stay hopeful, healthy, and happy, how we take care of ourselves so we can show up the best version and take care of others. Today on my show, I have my friend Pamela. Please welcome to the stage, Pamela. Good morning, Pamela. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning, Annie. Great to be here.
I'm glad you're here. So tell my audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you live, all the good things.
Great. Pamela Sams. I can go by Pam Sams. It rhymes, so people will remember that quite a bit. I hail from the DMV. For most people who don't know, it's the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. I'm on the Virginia side. I have been practicing financial planning for the past 22 years, and that's all about me, really about financial wellness for women.
I love that. So you said DMV, and I went right away to, isn't it driver motor vehicle? I'm like, what? Where did
exactly.
you
The place that most people do not want to be is the DMV.
Well, you educated me today, because I did not know that Maryland, Virginia. I didn't know that. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. The District of Maryland and Virginia, is that what you call it? Is that what
the District of Columbia. So DC, Maryland, and Virginia. DMV.
Okay. Awesome to know. Thank you for educating us this morning. I love learning. So tell us, when you think about, I always like to get people's view on storms or disruptions. What is that word? How would you define it even?
Well, I mean, storms often come into our lives. Those are those events that you did not anticipate. That just kind of comes at you, with just with the regular weather, with thunderstorms, they come out of the blue. And the same thing with disruption and storms in your life, things that just are thrown at you that come out of the blue. So that's what I think about when I think about the storms in our lives, and the disruption is things going to happen, that saying, if I can use it, SHIT, things happen that way. And we just have to kind of flow with it as storms come into our lives.
Yeah. And they come at you. You're right. And then you get to decide what we do. That's when choice comes in, and what we do with it. So do you have a professional or a personal storm that you've walked through, that you've faced in your life, that you'd be willing to share with us today?
Oh, definitely. That actually, turned into a rainbow on the other side. So the disruption and storm that happened is actually how I got into financial services, was early 2000s. Okay. Unfortunately, my dad passed away in 2001. Leaving my mom a widow of after 50 years of marriage, and trying to figure out finances on her own. So that was kind of the storm that happened. He was the rock in our family, and coming from an older generation where men took care of most of the household finances, my mother was a little bit at a loss in terms of her finances. I was able to use my financial management, the MBA, newly minted MBA, to help her through that storm. And together we figured it out. And I figured there are other women similar to my mother. And that's how I ended up in financial services, by that storm, really turning that storm into more of a rainbow to help other women with their finances.
Yeah, Pamela, I'm sorry for the loss of your dad. And I sadly know that this story is way, way, way too familiar. Mm-hmm. I have so many friends that are widowed, young in life, or different stages of life, and don't necessarily know about their finances, let alone have them in order. And so this is so important to me, for you to be here with us, because my heart always goes out and says, be educated about your money, your business, your household, whether you want to or not. Talk about it regularly, be on the same page, be knowledgeable. And then we know more women have wealth due to becoming widows or inheriting from parents that die, and just women choosing to be single or being single in the world and building businesses. So when your dad passed, and you and your mom were trying to figure out, how do we get the money in order, and what do we need to know, and what do we not know, all of those questions, that can be overwhelming. And so how did you stay hopeful? And I'm going to add your mom into this. So how did you stay hopeful, but how did you help her stay hopeful when it could be so much to bear?
Oh, definitely. Within the first year of a transition similar to that, it's always a challenge. I told my mom as well as my clients is that don't make any financial decisions during that time period because you're just so emotional. So really, just I am a spiritual woman. I just really make sure that people are centered when it comes to those particular storms in their lives to make sure that they stay stable in that instance. And then from there, once you kind of subside or at least suppress some of the emotion during that time period, really getting into the hard numbers, into the facts for that. So that's how I really just start from a place of centering first. I am a behavioral financial advisor, so it's all about behaviors and emotions that surround the money, and really leaning into that for people and understanding where they're coming from, and then move them forward gently.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's the term is gentle, because it's going to be a journey, and you don't have to take leaps and bounds at the beginning, but really taking those baby steps as you go along the way.
Wonderful. I think you said some really good things there. You said grounded, you said keep faith in it, right? Like just that peace and grounding. And a hard part, especially when it's a disruption, it's not like, oh, we're slowly, gradually separating our money. Someone dies, you have to deal with it right
Mhm.
then and right there, but doing your best to take that emotion out and to gently guide with facts, not just emotion, right? Because that reactionary, when someone dies, we don't know, we start to spin, right? And
Mhm.
no matter, even if someone is dying, we're never quite prepared for that final day usually,
Never. Yeah. Good point.
right? And
Mhm.
so staying grounded, keeping faith, and trying to gently bring logic and let the emotion not lead the financial decisions, which is why people say wait a year, is because
Yes.
it's like, I got to get out of here. I got to go here. What do I do? That panic, right? So
Exactly.
how about staying healthy, Pamela? So I used to be gym owner. I had two gyms, and I
Oh,
never,
wow. Great.
thank you. I never thought about, I think about health as physical as one component of it, but I really believe
Mhm.
there's seven. So we have physical, emotional, mental, financial, spiritual, relational, and career health. And
Mhm.
so how did you yourself, I'd love to hear some of the strategies you used and some of the strategies you helped your mom use to stay healthy in the midst of great loss and change in
Mhm.
both of your lives.
Yes, and you just cited that whole will of life, basically, is all those different components that we run into in our lives, and then really just focusing on those key components. Staying healthy. Like you said, physical, of course, staying active, perhaps walking, going to the gym, yoga. I did yoga after my two sons were born, early
Mhm.
2000s. That was kind of that impact that happened at the same time. But staying centered in with the yoga, because that helped as well. And then spiritually, of course, I'm a Christian, so I read my Bible every day. That's how I start that power hour, to really stay healthy in that aspect. And then mental health, self care is so important, and I'm sure your listeners, being probably mostly women, we don't do enough of self care for ourselves. We take care of others because we're natural nurturers, but unfortunately, we really neglect our self-care. So self-care is very important. So those are really some of the things. Meditation is really one of the things that I leaned into as well, and helped my mother through that transition, is really because she's also, she was, because she did pass away recently, a spiritual woman. And so really just going to that faith and understanding, taking care of yourself from a healthy standpoint, spirituality, and also mental, and also the physical.
I just watched a show on Netflix called Heal, and it
Hmm.
was about
Okay.
the power of our body, which I've always
Mhm.
believed in the power of our body and our
Yes.
mind. And it was a lot about calm down,
Mhm.
and that people are living in fight or flight, that we
Yes.
used to not have that, a constant of that. We would sometimes have moments, and now it becomes our normal to always be in this pace. And
Yes.
how praying, I start my day with an hour in
Mhm.
God's word as well, but praying actually, just like our cortisone levels are so high, but just praying calms us down.
Mhm.
Meditation calms down the nervous system, which when it's running all the time is worn out, and why we're more susceptible to disease, because our immune system, we're exhausted, right?
Yes.
Um,
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to know, Pamela, one thing I really love in life that helps me, and you obviously have some of this practice in your life, is I'm not the greatest at rule following. When I hear rule, I think, oh, I'm going to be in trouble, usually in trouble. But I love rituals and routines. I love
Yes.
patterns. And I think patterns as human beings, as
Mhm.
women, as caregivers, as business owners, set us up to succeed. So do you have like a morning routine or an evening routine or a ritual, whatever your language is around that are kind of non-negotiable? Doesn't mean 100% of the time, but 80% of the time they are how you start or end your day, or a moment in the middle of your day that you could share with our audience?
Oh, definitely. I'm all about rituals and routines. As a structured planner, that's basically how we operate, is having some type of start to our day. So I mentioned before the power hour. So always starts with prayer, meditation, inspirational speeches. That kind of gets me going as well. Les Brown, all of the greats that I listen to in the morning. So I transitioned from prayer to motivational speaking to affirmations or affirmations. I don't know if you have been following that, but really putting that in reverse on it has already happened. Because our brain doesn't understand the difference between the two, right? So you
Right.
say, hey, I am this, I am that. So I go through some affirmations. And then as a business owner, I go through my business plan every day. So I go to know what matrix I need to hit, what that end goal and what that looks like is what I'm trying to achieve, and why I do what I do every day, the why. And I mentioned before how I got into financial services. So that's my why, is that I get up and I help women every day with their finances. And that's how I start my day, as prayer, inspirational speeches, affirmations, and then on to business, so I can start my day and be the best version of myself to my clients.
I love that. I had this feeling about you. I was like, oh, I want to hear her morning. I want people to hear it, because it's how we succeed. Sometimes people think you're so successful in business, and it's like, well, really my greatest success is that I followed through with my morning routine, and it made me prepared for the best and the worst of the day. It made me feel energized. It made me feel lovely. It made me feel loved. It made me feel full of abundance that I could give and help people live in that space that you get to live in every day. I love, one of my favorite motivational speakers is Nicole Johnson. I don't know if you've
Okay, yeah.
ever seen her. Do you know who she is?
I have not, but sounds
You,
great.
yeah, you might want to look her up. So she traveled with women of faith for years, but she does some really, really profound. She's a dramatist, so she kind of acts and speaks, but she talks about being an invisible woman and how, as a parent, we can feel invisible, especially as a mom, because we're caregivers. She talks about getting in the ring when we're diagnosed with cancer or some disease. She talks about all the different hats in our closet and voices in our closet of, you need to dress like this. No, you'll be too sexy. No, you'll stand out. No, you'll sink in. No, you'll, like, all the things we go through to show up the best version of ourselves as a woman and as a woman of faith. So she's really cool. And I always like to recommend women speakers. There's a lot of great women speakers out there. How about happy? Did you and your mom, I know it's been a few years since your father passed, but can you remember back to that time and think about, here's the way we stayed happy, or here's how we found humor in the midst of the mess, the heartache? Was there humor or happiness to be found? And if so, how?
Yeah, definitely. You have to, during those storms, find the rainbow. The rainbow in the cloud is what Maya Angelou always said, find that rainbow in the cloud. So during that time, of course, I'm from a large family, so I'm number 7 of 8. So all of us really, after that, after our father had passed away, is really remembering the good times, remembering the fun stories. That always makes you happy, always makes you smile. You always have these stories that you can share, and or even learn stories. That was something that even after my dad had passed away, and even recently after my mother had passed away, finding out about stories you never even knew about, and then chuckling on, wow, I did not know that about my dad or about my mom. And so, the finding those happy, bright rainbow moments when you're going through a storm or a transition like that really, really, really warms your heart.
100%. The reminiscing about the silly things and remembering the good. And I think that that's kind of a gift of death, usually, is that you remember the good stuff so much better than all the dumb things that bothered you, or you'd like kind of let it go. So I'm the 5th of 8 kids. So I didn't know you were, there's
Yes.
only 6 of us still living, but there was 8 of us.
Yeah,
At
7 of us still around. I lost my brother back in 2005 from MS, unfortunately. So that's one of the organizations I do support wholeheartedly from that. But yes, large families.
Large families. I lost my brother in 91 to suicide, and I lost my sister in 22 to alcoholism. And so, but interestingly, and I'm always kind of supporting causes in a lot of different ways. I love to do that. And so I've done the MS 150 ride, and I didn't really know. I had one friend that had been diagnosed many years ago with MS, but she has completely healed her body miraculously through lots of different things. But I didn't know a lot of people, but my husband and I said, we'll do the MS ride. And through that experience, you just meet so many people, and you remember how blessed you are to have a healthy body and that you can ride 150 miles, even if you don't feel like riding 150 miles.
Exactly.
It helps motivate me for causes. So Pamela, is there anything you wish you would have known before your dad passed that you would like to tell someone out there that's in a marriage? We all think we're going to live forever to some extent, but we know we're not. And unfortunately, two of my girlfriends lost their husbands in January this year suddenly. And what do you wish you could have told your younger self or your mom or both prior to losing your dad?
Yeah, I mean, that you never really prepare for that, a loss of a parent, because that was the first time it happened, and you're never really prepared. But you have to kind of think of us as humans. Eventually we're going to be here without our parents, but that's something that you never prepared for. So, having those, as I mentioned before, having those conversations with your parents when they're alive to, capture those stories. And that's what I'm doing with my kids, is that I'm sharing these, silly moments, these funny stories that I have as I was growing up, to really put that so they can, translate it and move it on from generation to generation. And so that's wish I had have known that a little bit earlier, is really to talk to your elders. It's not the old lady in the corner at the family reunion that nobody wants to talk to. Talk to your elders and understand where they were, how their lives were, and how blessed you are just by being part of their seed, and understanding their story, so you can share those throughout your lifetime as well, and use those as inspiration, because especially coming from the African American community, there has been a lot of struggle, and understanding that, and that's what made them strong, and that, hopefully that thread carried on from generation to generation.
Knowing that history, I don't even have one here. I have this book that I wrote in 2015. And I wrote it it was kind of my sarcastic response to everyone telling me to write a book. I was like, you write a book. So it's just filled with like 150 questions. Like, what was your greatest dream? What's your greatest achievement? What are you proud of? Like all this. And then people would buy it to prompt themselves to write books. But then somebody used it to pass back and forth with their teenager. Somebody used it for their date night. But a woman wrote to me and she said, I used your book to interview my sister dying in hospice. And I gave it to her adult children when she passed. But what I was going to say about it is that my husband and I visit my mom at least once a year in San Francisco, sometimes twice. I brought it with me last year, and I asked my mother all the questions. And then I gave it to my kids as a Christmas gift. And I thought, it's so easy to take for granted, but to have, I love that you're sharing with your kids, but I encourage our listeners, get one book. And there's so many, you don't have to get my book, but get a book with prompts and questions. And yes, answer them yourselves. But let those people in your life that aren't, none of us are always going to be here. It's like, we don't know we're all going to die, but we're all going to die. It's the only way out, right? So, but get those answers in one space, because someday they will be a treasure that today you take for granted. So I love that you are doing that with your own kids. That's beautiful. And you're right. The history of, there's so much unknown that people just assume, oh, everything's fine and everything's great now. No, people have worked very hard. Many people have died to get as far as we are, and are still not getting the justice that they deserve. We need to be educated.
Exactly.
And the other question I wanted to ask you, Pamela, is do you have a success story of somebody that you have worked with that really, without your guidance, just didn't, a lot of people don't like to talk about money. I tell people all the time, you'd rather talk about sex than money, because it's uncomfortable, because then we have to acknowledge if we're broke or we're spending or not giving or whatever. So do you have a success story of a client you worked with that really has just evolved because of your wisdom, patience, knowledge, and guidance?
Oh yeah, definitely. For 22 years, or you could pick out those those success stories. As you mentioned before, money is one of those topics people just don't want to talk about. I attribute it to, or I compare it to going to the principal's office or going to the dentist. The dentist is necessary, but it's a painful experience. Same thing with your finances, but similar, as I mentioned before, being a behavioral financial advisor, really understanding how people make decisions and operate around money. So several years ago, a woman came to me, very just didn't want to deal with money at all. It was to the point where it was physical. She would break out into hives because she really just did not want to deal with her finances. So again, back to our earlier conversation, trying to understand where that came from, what her money story is, how she grew up with money. It came to the point where every time in her household she saw her mom and dad, when it dealt with money, that they would have these huge arguments, these huge fights. That was something that she did, she wanted to stay away from. So every time money came up, that particular situation would come into her mind. So understanding where that came from, but then calming her down. Again, you have to come from a space where you're able to understand what the story is, what your money story is, and try to rewrite that in order to move you forward. That's basically what I do. So after, several consultations and slow baby steps, we were able to get her to a point where she did not break out into hives with money. She was able to put money away. And now, actually last year, she was able to retire successfully, and, definitely had told me that I was a really big influence to getting her where she is today, with having a happy retirement without having to deal with the physical aspects of even the word money, so she can be happy and successful.
Yeah. And I wish, Pamela, that was like a total rarity, but I don't think it is. I think a lot of people are just like, oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm like, are you really good? Well, I've got some credit cards. I'm like, okay, that is not having money. That is like,
that is having somebody else's money.
That's right. That's how we get in trouble. And so you also used a word really early in this conversation. You used the word gentle. And I think that is really a gift. I want to say to my listeners, if you are feeling anxious about money, having a conversation with Pamela and just saying, just talk to me. It doesn't mean you're going to work together or not, but I think it's like that's the first step, is we have to acknowledge if we're overspending, or we're not where we want to be, or we're looking at retirement and we're thinking, how are we ever going to do that? And so I think I love that you have a gentle spirit of letting people be who they are and having that conversation to move forward and to be directed, if it's not to work with you, where to go, where to start. And sometimes it's just starting. It's just, we need that gentleness of spirit. Yeah,
exactly. And it's not a judgment zone. That's what a lot of people fear when they go to talk to an advisor or someone about their finances, is that you're going to be judged on what I'm spending money on, or where part of where I am in life, I should be this. And that's the thing that a lot of people, especially women, we compare ourselves to others. I should be here, my friend, is here. Why am I not there? And they say that comparison is the thief of joy. And that's what happens a lot of times with money. We try to keep up with the Joneses. We think we need to be certain areas in our lives by a certain age. And I tell people, I can take you where you are and move you forward. So it's no judgment. Whatever happened before you came into my door, that's in the past. I'm not going to say, why did you spend this? Why did you do that? How do we assess where you are, and how do we move you forward?
I love that. I think it's so important, Pamela. And I do think people are afraid of being judged. And I think with social media, so many people, their life can look so perfect. And I remember my daughter and I in particular talking, we have 3 kids, but my daughter and I talking about, she'd seen neighbors or friends with brand new BMWs and cars and 16-year-olds. And I was like, no, are you guys going to buy us a car? No. Are you guys, in fact, when we talk to financial advisors, people say, well, how much do you want to leave your kids? Or what? We're like, we don't. And that might not seem nice, but for us, we paid for them to go to college, or a big percentage of that. We educated them. We provided home. They lived a beautiful life. They go on vacations. They did all these cool things. And it's like, it's okay for your parents to also enjoy life now that they're done spending $1 million on raising kids and all of these things. But I do think that social media and comparison, you look at, well, they're rich. They have X, Y, and Z and 5 houses and 22 cars and whatever. And sometimes that isn't the full story, right? And
That
so,
is not, and
right.
that's what I say is that, the social media, unfortunately, it's people's highlight reels. That's what they're not going to show you, all of the storms and disruptions that we talked about earlier. They're going to show you the good stuff, the highlight reel. As well. And that kind of reminded me, I think it was a commercial years ago, and this guy, and he has this, he has the house, he has a car, and they zoom into his face. He's like, I have this, but I am over my up to my eyeballs in debt. But he's living this lifestyle, but he's like, I'm up to here with debt. And we don't see that. We see the nice cars, we see the BMWs, we see all of that. But these people, in order to live these lifestyles, sometimes could be compromising themselves on the other end, and we just don't know it. They're kind of slow suffering just to keep up this facade, unfortunately.
I remember, working with clients that would say, I got to lose weight. Like, I eat way too many chips at night. And I was like, I don't really think chips are the problem. I don't think weight's your problem. Tell me more. I'm maxed out on 5 credit cards and I'm so stressed out at night. So it wasn't the chips, it was the credit cards, right? Or it was the debt, or it was the fear. And there's somebody said something, I don't know who quoted that, but it was like, today we buy things we don't need to impress people we don't like, to do whatever, however that goes. But I was like, oh, it's so true. Like, just live within your means,
Yeah, exactly. And that's the unfortunate piece. Our brains, I always say saving is not sexy because you can't see it. And so, you can see the cars, you can see the shoes, you can see the houses, but nobody's looking at your big 401k balance or those things. And that's the outward appearance that, like you said, we were trying to portray, our facing part of our lives. And just the highlights of what people see, unfortunately, is that behind the scenes, there could be a lot going on that we are not aware of.
Exactly. I've never heard savings isn't sexy, but I like that. Savings isn't sexy, but it's
saving isn't sexy, but we gotta do it.
And it feels good. You sleep better at night when you have some savings, right? So, Pamela, it's just been lovely chatting with you this morning. I know my listeners are going to want to learn more from you or connect with you. Where's the best place to follow you, to connect? Where would you like to send them to?
Exactly. On social media, so Facebook and Instagram, it is at Jackson Sam's Wealth. They can follow me there. It's I post a lot of inspirational messages, but also some really good tips as well with your finances.
Wonderful. And if you will add that into the comments after the show so they can just click on a link, that would be fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with me this morning, Pamela. Thank you for our audience listening. We hope this helped you, encouraged you, inspired you on this wacky, wonderful Wednesday. Hope to see you next week on H3TV. Take care. Thank you, Pam.
Bye-bye.